This is Jordan Smotherman with Strong, Swift, Durable, and I want to talk today about the plyometric and agility training that we've been implementing lately, especially on the Strong, Swift, Durable side, and how that, what that is doing for you and how that fits in to improving fitness overall. So first of all, whenever we look at what plyometric and agility training is, what it is high intensity, low volume, jumping, hopping, bounding on the plyometric side. And then on the agility side, it's high intensity, low volume, multi-directional sprinting. In terms of the type of training you're going to be doing, it's always going to be quality over quantity, and you're going to have high intensity and a pretty high rest to work ratio, where you may rest 5 or 6 times the duration that you're working. So let's say you work for 8 seconds, you're going to rest for 40 to 50 seconds after that effort. The way that we do that is by having you do some sort of stretch and then also prescribing a certain rest interval. Or we'll have you work another side of the body that's going to allow the side of the body that we're working, which is typically the lower body, to rest from the effort that it just performed. So how do we train plyometrics? How do we train the agility work, the multi-directional speed and agility work that we want to do? Well, first of all, we're going to activate the stretch shortening cycle. The stretch shortening cycle works off of quick loading and unloading of a muscle. As you load it, then your muscles stretch. There's a reflex in your body called the stretch reflex, which causes those muscles to contract. As how that works together, the loading, stretch, and contraction is a stretch shortening cycle. We're going to activate that. We're going to do that by a couple different things. First of all, we're going to put the emphasis on minimizing foot contact time. So you want to minimize the time that your foot hits the ground and then comes back off. If it's spending a lot of time on the ground, then you have a long what's called amortization phase, and you're going to lose the force increase of the stretch shortening cycle. And then we're also going to be focusing on maximizing the distance or height that you're going. So if we're doing a vertical jump off of, let's say, a box or something like that, we want you to jump as high as you can. Or if we're going to do a broad jump off of a box, we want you to jump as far as you can, while also minimizing the amount of time that your feet are on the ground. Shorter your feet on the ground, the more you're going to be activating that stretch shortening cycle. Making you come off of a box or something like that is going to provide the load, which provides the stretch, which amplifies the contraction of the muscle, the stretch shortening cycle. Why do we want to do this? Well, because we want to force an adaptation of increased neuromuscular response to the stretch stimulus. So the stretch stimulus is, let's say, jumping off of a box or jumping onto and then back off of a box, sprinting. Every time your foot hits, then your toe makes contact. That force into the ground stretches your muscles, stretches your Achilles, and then as the muscles contract, it's going to throw your foot back up and it's going to throw you forward. So as muscles stretch and contract, which is the stretch reflex, the stretch shortening cycle amplifies muscle action by increasing the quality of the force without increasing effort from your muscles. So if you have 2 athletes, one who's never done plyometric training, one who's done years and years of plyometric training, the one that doesn't have any plyometric training is not going to get a lot of bounce from their muscles as their foot hits the ground, as opposed to the person that has been doing plyometric training. They're going to get a lot of bounce as their foot hits the ground. And so these 2 athletes, for 3 steps, let's say 3 big steps or 3 big bounds, the one with the plyometric training is going to be able to move a farther distance without increasing their effort. And if they were to go at the same effort, if the 2 athletes were to go at the exact same effort, the one with plyometric training would go much farther because they have increased neuromuscular response and a better stretch, a more trained stretch shortening cycle, so greater muscle force. So in just sort of plain terms, we want to, if your muscles and tendons work as springs, and every time you stretch a spring, it wants to snap back, right? So if they work as springs, we want to increase the tension that you can put on that spring. As we increase the tension, then we increase the snap back. In other words, we increase that muscle force. Yet we're not necessarily increasing the muscle, the weight, how hard your muscles have to work to get that same snap back. So in terms of training, the way that we program this in is we kind of have there's two ways to train. You can have event-specific training. That's what we do a lot of. You're going to ruck, you're going to run, or you're going to do some sort of carry or something like that. That is something that's going to be event-specific to something you're going to do outside. If you're going to do something outside, you're going to be moving over ground, you're going to be running, things like that. And so we have a lot of that. Even in our current cycle right now, we have a lot of that style of training, that event-specific training. And obviously, it transfers very well. Running is a great way to train to improve running, as is intuitively obvious. The other side of training is physiologically specific training. And that is the plyometric and agility work. Now, whenever you program this event-specific training with a physiological specific training, what you have is an increase of fitness by increasing your economy and your event-specific economy. So let's take an example where we give two athletes who one has just event-specific training, one has event-specific and physiological specific training, in this case run and plyometric training as opposed to just run training. And then you give them a tank of oxygen and you say, okay, I want you to take this tank of oxygen, it only has so much oxygen in it, I want you to run as far as you can. Assuming that they have the same aerobic capacity and all that kind of stuff, controlling for all the other variables other than just the types of training that they've experienced, the athlete with the plyometric ability is going to be able to move farther on that oxygen, on that fixed amount of oxygen, because they're going to be getting more force out of their muscles, which is going to be throwing their body, projecting their body farther forward with every single step. And yet, it's not demanding any more oxygen, as opposed to the person who's only had the run training. So this stretch shortening cycle is allowing us to be able to move farther, to be able to move with greater force, put more force into the ground, and therefore get more force out of that. As the ground reaction force, it's just a Newton's law. The more you put in, the more you're going to get out. Action equals reaction. Then the person who has only event-specific training. So in this way, by programming both into our cycles, we can have these two types of training complement one another, and then we increase your economy. That increase in economy obviously translates to an increase in fitness and greater performance in the outdoors.